Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I got a special video for you guys today. As promised, as part of the Definitive Technology ST1 speaker stands, which I'll actually link to this video description. I have with me the Definitive Technology Demand D11 bookshelf speakers. This is part of their Demand series lineup, which includes full range speaker towers, as well as bookshelf speakers, and also center channel speakers. These speakers are all passive, meaning unlike their BP series speakers, these do not include a built-in amplification or amplifier. So the one that we'll be looking at today is the D11, which is their largest bookshelf speaker that Definitive Technology has, which is a passive speaker. So without further ado, let's take a look at the speaker itself. All right, so let's just go over the cabinet itself and just go over some of the specs. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll go over the dimensions of the speaker itself. So the speaker is about, and I have some notes here on the side, I don't have the specs memorized. So the speaker is about 13 inches tall. It has a width of 7 inches and then a depth of 12 inches. So the cabinet itself, like I mentioned earlier, it is made out of MDF. On the rest of the enclosure, but in the front you may notice that we have an aluminum baffle, so it does give it a little bit of sturdiness. So that's one thing I noticed. It definitely feels solid when you do hold the speakers. The construction absolutely feels solid. The speakers do weigh about 19 pounds, so not too heavy, and I think they're going to sit nicely on those Definitive Technology ST1 speakers stands, so they pair out pretty nice. The first thing that I do want to show you, let's look at the back of the speakers first. So we'll just kind of rotate this around. So the back of the speakers, you may notice that you have quite a few binding posts right here. So you have two sets. So you're probably wondering, well, what are we going to use that for? So these speakers do support biamping. So you can actually power the tweeter or the high frequencies using a different set of amplifiers and also use another amplifier to power the woofers or the mid-range speakers or the lower end frequencies. So that's going to make it, that allows you to have more power going to the speakers so that the speakers are not power hungry. So the speaker, if you look at the bottom of the speakers, you do have a threaded insert where the speaker stands are going to go. You'll be able to attach the speaker stands to the bottom of this so that, you make sure you do have rubber feet as well so that it doesn't slide off the table. And also it helps it not slide off the top plate of the speaker stands that, I'll also link to my description of this video as well. If you look at the top of the speakers, you may notice that you have a cloth grill at the top. And this is because this speaker includes a passive radiator, which is one of the reasons why I decided to go with this bookshelf speaker versus other brands. But you do have a passive radiator, which is covered by the same speaker cloth that we see here for the front that is also magnetically, attachable. So it's the same material to protect the passive radiators. These speakers are 8 ohm speakers, so they're definitely made more efficient versus larger bookshelf speakers, which may be 4 ohms. And that's because these speakers are more targeted towards, I would say music listening, not really for dedicated home theaters. So that's why you see these speakers being, they support 8 ohms. So that's good. It's definitely efficient. They do support a total frequency response of 44 hertz at the lower end, and then 24,000 hertz at the upper end. The recommended amplifier power per channel should be at least 20 watts to 200 watts. That's how much these speakers do support. Let's talk about the actual speaker driver, placement / construction. And I'm gonna look to my notes here. So these do include a 1-inch aluminum tweeter, which is pretty nice. And you're probably wondering, why is it not at the center? And this is because Definitive Technology decided to offset these speakers, and I don't have the other speaker with me, but they decided to offset these speakers so that way, you have to place them in the right place. So the one that I have right here is the left speaker. You'll see it, how it phases out to the left of the speaker, and then the right side of the speaker, you'll see the tweeter will, phase out to the right of the baffle itself. And you know, Definitive Technology decided to do this to, you know, basically this asymmetry helps reduce the effects of sound bouncing off the corners of the baffle itself. And you know, this should result in a smoother, high frequencies, and better imaging. So I did forget to mention they do include a waveguide at the top, which they do call the 2020 wave alignment lens. So this is supposed to help kind of eliminate any of the harshness that you may get with a hard dome tweeter. So that is something that Definitive Technology decided to do. The mid-range speakers are 6.5-inch polypropylene cone, and you may notice that you also have the same thing at the middle right here, which is pretty much the same thing as this, which is a waveguide, or they call it a linear response waveguide, or you know, it's also known as a phase plug. So Definitive Technology actually uses something called BDSS, which is Balanced Double Surround System, which basically was introduced in the BP 8000 series speakers, which is part of their powered lineup, which include a built-in amplifier. And the one that I actually have is the BP 9000. So the BP 8000s are the predecessors to those. So that's the first time that they actually patent and introduce this technology. And what it's supposed to do is basically give you more output from a smaller set of mid-range speakers. So with this being 6.5-inch, it's basically trying to give it the effects of having like an 8-inch mid-range speaker or driver. So that technology is included in here as well. And another thing that it does is it allows the speakers to go in and out and push air with much more power, and be able to emulate speakers of bigger sizes where they may have like an 8-inch mid-range driver. So that is pretty neat that they included that. Let's go back to the top real quick. The bass radiator. Unlike the smallest D7 bookshelf speaker, the D9s and the D11s also include the bass radiators at the top. The D7 actually includes a bass port in the back. So the reason why I decided to go with the D11s, obviously they're going to have the bigger drivers when it comes to the mid-range, but also is because they do have the passive radiators. The main reason that I want to use these speakers is for music listening. It's not so much as movie watching. I might do some casual TV watching here and there, but nothing that requires, you know, any sort of dynamic bass or stuff that you see in movies where you want that, you know, extra oomph from your subwoofers. This will be mostly used for casual music listening. The D9s and the D11s include an integrated 6x10 oval. You won't be able to see it here, but you can kind of see the outline right here. They do include a 6x10-inch passive radiators, which provides low and extension and makes way for much cleaner bass. When it comes to music, you definitely want, you know, me personally, I prefer to have a much tighter bass and a much more responsive bass versus, you know, much slower bass from ported subwoofers, which are beneficial when it comes to movies because they do give you that powerful bass that you want for movies. But when it comes to music, I want something that's giving me, you know, most accurate bass response as possible, especially when it comes to music, and something that's pretty quick and snappy. With these bookshelf speakers, you know, them being about 12 inches in depth, a lot of times when you have bookshelf speakers that are ported in the back, similar to like the D7s, which are actually much smaller than this one, you don't want them to sit too close to the wall because you're gonna have cases where I've noticed, you know, there'll be some some sounds bouncing off the walls. You might be losing some of the actual bass response. And by having a passive bass radiator at the top, this means that you can actually move these speakers much closer to the wall without having to worry about any unwanted sounds, you know, bouncing off of the walls or anything like that, and causing a distortion or anything. So you can put these speakers really close to the wall and not have any issues because of that bass radiator. And I do want to note that the actual bass radiator itself is not powered. The mid-range speakers are the ones that are powered by the amplifier, so I do want to make a point about that. But basically what happens is when these mid-range drivers are moving in and out and, creating pressure inside of the cabinet, that also pushes air up. Instead of having to go out the back of the speakers, it pushes air up at the base radiators, which allow it to produce an additional lower end extension basically, and allow these speakers to go down to like 44 hertz, which I think for bookshelf speakers is pretty good, and especially for music listening. I would say, music like string instruments, not so much as like hip hop where it requires a really low, a much lower bass response. These speakers will do just fine. Definitive Technology does give you a 5-year warranty on the drivers as well as the cabinet itself, so that's good to know. And you can rest assured that you're covered in case something goes wrong. But with passive speakers like this where you do not have a built-in amplifier, the chances of something going wrong is really low, unless you mistakenly tear the driver or drop the speaker and crack the cabinet or something like that. I really don't see any issues happening with these speakers, and is one of the reasons why I decided to go with these instead of having maybe the smaller set of the powered BP 9000 speakers. I decided to go with this one because that's something I don't want to have to worry about, and also I could pick out whatever subwoofer I want. And for these speakers, I actually have an SVS Micro 3000 subwoofer, which comes in a really small form factor that I'll also link to this video that you can check out. And I think it pairs up pretty nice. I mean, it's a really small subwoofer, but packs quite a punch. I mean, it has dual drivers on each side, so it's able to hit some of those low ends that these speakers may miss for any sort of casual movie watching or any sort of movie listening that requires a lot of bass response. So you are covered for 5 years though, at least. But one thing I did notice is that the warranty is limited to the original purchaser only. So I'm assuming if something goes wrong that they're going to want you to prove, your receipt or something like that. So that is for the original purchaser. So finally, who are these speakers for? Me personally, I think these speakers are for anybody that partakes in any sort of music listening and wants to get into any sort of hi-fi music setup or listen to any sort of high resolution music. I personally would not recommend these for like a home theater setup unless this is something, you have a smaller home theater setup in your living room or anything like that. Because, these are not really big speakers and they don't have, huge drivers. So I wouldn't really recommend this as having like your main right-left channel speakers. These can serve as surrounds perfectly fine and will do an outstanding job. But for me personally, I think these are more for people who enjoy music, want to have these in like their listening room or in your family room, and you want to enjoy listening to music with these speakers. One thing I can say for sure about these speakers, from my experience at least, this past couple of days that I've had these speakers, is it is super detailed. I mean, I found myself listening to more, genres that I probably didn't pay attention to before, like string instruments, classical music, things like that. So if you have that kind of stuff that you listen to, you are going to get your money's worth from these speakers. I mean, these speakers are super detailed. And if you want that lower end, you can obviously pair this up with a subwoofer and then you'll be fine. So that's nothing to worry about. But me personally, I prefer to have these in like a music room or something like that. So that's what I recommend these speakers for. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do consider subscribing. I'm also going to link the other videos that I mentioned, which are for the speaker stands that come with or that are provided by Definitive Technology specifically for these speakers, as well as the SVS subwoofer that I do have a review of as well. So please do consider subscribing, and I hope you have a great day.